Good morning, sickos. It is August 29th. I'm Dan from Oregon, and this is MMA for Brunch, where you come and get your daily dose of all your MMA news. And we got Bow Mother Effer, a comment from Bruce Buffer to Nate Diaz, some fight announcements, and a PFL preview featuring the one and only Nolan King. But let's look into this, and I think we must know the backstory to this. So let's go to TMZ Sports for the for the exclusive interview with Bruce Buffer. Let's do this shit.
Nate Diaz has a little bad taste in his mouth right now.
Nate Diaz, I love Nate, but he's always got a bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah, he's ineligible because he's going through a lawsuit.
I'm not familiar with that.
Right. Well, he said that he felt underpromoted by the UFC, and he's been bashing them of late. And
Nate, I heard you made $7 or more million on your last fight. I don't want to hear you complaining about being underpromoted by the UFC. You should be thanking the UFC and bowing to Dana White every time you see him. Ari Emanuel, Patrick Whitesell. You've got $7 or more million gross before taxes, maybe much more, which I love knowing that you have, Nate. Please, I don't want to hear any complaints.
do you think we'll ever see the trilogy, Diaz versus McGregor?
I think we all want to see it, but you know what? I don't think we can make determinations about anything until we see what happens with Khabib and Conor.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big fight. I don't think in front of my guns. I think behind my guns. Let's see what happens.
Sure.
And then the marketing brains of the UFC will put together what the best thing is for the fans.
God damn it, fucking muted. So Nate Diaz, take two. Nate Diaz has his response here, and obviously he takes to Twitter a few days ago and says, Bruce Buffer, what the fuck? Get off the UFC nuts. You're bowing down right now, telling me to bow down. Fuck that. You keep bowing down. I bow down to no one ever for all the money in the world. ... People love that shit. And if you're playing the drinking game, drink or smoke, even though it's early in the morning. Because obviously I came in muted, like always. Nice quick edit. So everyone loves that, right, Joe? And so, holy shit, what the hell is Bruce Buffer thinking, man? What? All right, job security is what he's thinking. These guys are my bosses. I might as well have their side opposed to Nate. They're there every goddamn weekend. Nate's here once a year, once every 2 years, whatever. But this is bullshit, man. This is, the same old business. Just keep the money train going. UFC raking in 90% of all the profits. Nate was the first guy who, considering his record and everything, got properly paid. Think of all the other stars out there that should be making this type of money. I'm not a math genius, but $7 billion, you guys do the fucking math. 800 million grossed this year is what they're looking at. You guys do the math, man. Is 7 million really that crazy? Go to boxing, go to PBC, go check out a lot of those paydays that they're getting, man. But unless you're talking about Nate and Conor and their most recent disclosed paydays, and probably, what's his name too, Brock Lesnar had a high one. Unless you're talking about them, I don't know what to tell you, man. This shit here, all right, so we might get our guest. We shall see. Yeah, these guys are the only ones that were properly paid. Every other star out there, Daniel Cormier should be making $7 million. Who else? Everybody out there, dude. If you're a headliner in the UFC, you're a star. You're making pay-per-views, dude. Believe it or not, Tyrone Woodley should be making at least $1 million every freaking fight. DJ, all of these guys. All right, let's see if we can get Ricky Bones up in here. Okay. And so, what are you guys thinking, man? Do you think Nate was overpaid? Do you think everyone else is underpaid? Or are you just fine with how it is? Just want the proper piece of the pie, says Steve Sparks. Yep. And man, let's go back to Nate right after the first fight. And what did he say? He spit out a word there that was freaking perfect. And he basically said, him getting his first payment with Conor, he wasn't overpaid for Conor. That was like back pay from him getting fucked from all of his previous fights. Everyone wants to quote and say Nate was on a 20-20 contract before that. Well, if you do the deep dive, you learn that. What up, David Flores? Joe from H-Town. You learned that freaking Nate had a pretty decent contract back to like the Donald Cerrone days. And then all of a sudden, he renegotiated his contract to where, I don't know, even if he was a headliner or co-headliner or whatever the fuck, when he got onto a pay-per-view, he was going to get compensated better. And so what did they do? They ripped Nate off every pay-per-view after that. He went and headlined UFC on Fox shows and they effed him over. He freaking went down to FS1 shows, FX shows, everything that they possibly could to F him over because he was getting not just your show and win, but there was some other types of, payment methods in Nate's contract. And so he got reimbursed, or whatever word Nate liked to use. That was just a reimbursement from before. You've been effing me over for days. I still wasn't even properly paid for this one. Or my next one. And, man, so I'm all for Nate. Nate, I don't know if you're going to get $20 million. You might have to get that Conor fight to get 20 in your next one. But if you got a high upfront payment and then pay-per-view points with the right matchup, dude, you might reach that with Conor. But besides that, you should definitely not be taking too much of a pay cut to go take your next freaking fight. That is outrageous. But let's jump into one second, guys. Boom, turn off that sound. There we go. What up, MMA Pixels? And so Nate made $7 million, but he needs to bow to the UFC. He needs to go bow to Dana White and all that shit. You know what I think? I think line them up. Let's have Nate come slap all their asses again, dude. Why did he get to slap Dana the first time? I want to know more about this. But so there's Nate's response. Why don't we go straight to what Bruce Buffer had to say? With all respect, Nate, that is not what I meant by saying the word bow, quote unquote. I meant it as a sign of respect, as in when greeting someone, not a sign of submission, as I never expect you to do that for anyone. Praying emoji or bowing emoji. I'm not sure what he put there. And so, boom. Look at Bruce Buffer backpedaling that shit. Ran that shit right back. I'm pretty sure Bruce not isn't Japanese or something, so I don't know if he just goes around bowing everybody. Apparently, according to some people on his show, though, maybe that is correct. I don't know. Go listen to his podcast. Freaking produced by TJ DeSantis. Everyone, we are joined now by Ricky Bones of Sirius XM, and what did they just rename that to? Fight Nation, as I believe what it's called, and he is courteous enough to join us for this Bruce Buffer versus Nate Diaz conversation. Ricky, say what's up to the people.
What's up?
Awesome. If you get your video jumped on, I'll add you to the screen here. But man, okay, we've dove into the topic a little bit here. We got freaking Bruce Buffer coming out saying that Nate Diaz needs to bow to Dana White and Ari Emanuel and all them. Nate takes to Twitter, says, I bow to no man, not for all the money in the world. And quickly Bruce Buffer backsteps and he's like, whoa, 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 I didn't mean bowing to him like submission. I just meant it as a sign of respect. Ricky, what's your first take on all this?
I mean, Bruce Buffer is obviously a company guy, but I found it kind of surprising that he said that. I mean, he always has been a big fan of the Diaz brothers, and I don't know what he expected. I mean, you're gonna try and antagonize either Nick or Nate Diaz. It's gonna not work out too well. And I'll tell you something else. I mean, I don't know if it's because of the regime change, because ever since WME IMG took over, a lot of things have changed. I know that me dealing with the UFC, like booking guests and just, with credentials and stuff, I used to go through certain people, and now a lot of the people that I dealt with are no longer there. So there could be some pressure. Maybe his back is against the wall. It was kind of bizarre for me, to be honest.
It did kind of seem like, he's pitching some job security out there slightly. He's just like, oh, you always got to be on the boss's side here. It was definitely out of character to go after Nate like this. But, man, as soon as Nate receives like 15,000 likes on Twitter, Bruce quickly backstepped his comments and ran that shit right back. Could this be a case of Buffer just attaching his name to the Diaz bros?
I mean, what's interesting about it is, like, there's no loyalty with the UFC. And, like, I got to correct you. I'm no longer with Sirius XM. And, when you work for certain entities or companies, there's a lot of politics. There's a lot of just people trying to use you to kind of climb up the ladder. There's a lot of cronyism, nepotism. And I don't even think that's necessarily with the UFC as far as the cronyism or nepotism. I think it's more of the fact that you got a guy in Dana White who's kind of a sociopath. I mean, he is. I mean, it works in his favor. If you look at like psychological studies with like sociopaths or narcissists, a lot of times it does work in their favor, but also there's this weird tipping scale where it could go in one extreme, either negatively or positively really quickly. So I feel like, with a guy like a Dana White and now under new ownership with WME IMG, which I'm sure with like Ari Emanuel, he's probably falling more on like the sociopathic scale. These guys are unpredictable. So I think a guy like Buffer, he's just trying to do whatever he can, because if you look at guys like Burt Watson, Mike Goldberg, no one's really safe in that organization. You look at fighters. How many fighters has Dana White thrown under the bus? I mean, it's just one of those things where when you have a guy that's so unpredictable and is prone to knee-jerk reactions, which I have worked for someone like that, you're just at the mercy of however they're feeling that day.
Hey man, my apologies for the serious. I believe the latest one that I caught you on was, what was it, like Punch Drunk Sports on Luis J. Gomez's Gas Digital Network? I swear I saw you make an appearance over on there.
Oh yeah. No, it's all good, man. I've been doing a lot of stuff with Gas Digital, so I've kind of been off the radar. So no apologies needed,
Man, they got great things going on over there at Gas Digital. You make great points with Dana White, though. That guy, is freaking crazy, and we're kind of getting some of the behind the scenes looks or answers of what's going on. And one thing that I've taken away is Dana White pretty much just makes the main events for all of these fights that come up. He doesn't fill out the undercards or nothing like that. So when he was talking about Yair not accepting that fight, he's like, I make 42 fights a year. You don't accept that, I'll move the fuck on, man. We'll drop your ass. So I totally get what you're saying with Dana White being way unpredictable.
Yeah, and Dana White's a necessary evil. I mean, the guy is a fucking rock star. Whether you love him or hate him,
Mm.
I mean, the UFC would not be the UFC. I mean, what's so interesting is like I've been covering the sport since back when Zuffa first. And I was a fan of the sport since '93 from the first UFC, but covering the sport since back when Zuffa acquired the UFC from SEG and Bob Meyerowitz. And I was at the first event at the Trump Taj Mahal when Tito Ortiz. I believe it was one where Tito Ortiz fought Evan Tanner and became the UFC's lightweight champion. I think the youngest champion in UFC history. And Dana White still had hair. And it was crazy because he was running around. He was wearing this cheap suit. He looked like a total dork. And then the Ultimate Fighter came, and then this guy turns into Lex Luthor. And he's just this completely different guy. And, he really had to do a gut check and become this completely different person. And, whether you hate Dana White or you love him, the UFC would not be where it is without him. It's just the fact that be careful what you wish for because he's unpredictable. He's done a lot of things like calling Loretta Hunt a cunt, doing things that's just like, whoa. But it's one of those things where he's so embedded in the company, he's so close with the Fertitta brothers that now, even with WMEIMG, they are kind of lost without him. They need his guidance. He's pretty much the guy that all the fighters are afraid of, that they respect, that they're going to listen to and bow to, fighters and non-fighters like Bruce Buffer. So you kind of just have to let him do what he does.
Man, it is crazy that he's a necessary evil in this business. But man, you touch on some things too, and one of the things that really drew my attention was this KSI versus Logan Paul fight. And because Dana White has been really big on brainwashing everyone to think that UFC is the brand, UFC is the draw, UFC is everything. When KSI and Logan Paul go out here and they charge $10 to everybody and they get $800,000 or 800,000 people to buy this fight, they pack the whole arena. And I think that just went to show that, it's more that the fighters are the draw, the people are the main attraction. We're not exactly just tuning in for the UFC. What would you say to that?
I mean, the thing about that is it's a novelty fight. So unfortunately, if you have like Justin Gaethje and James Vick, say they said, fuck the UFC, I'm going to go out and do my own thing, and we're going to try and pack whatever arena and sell our own pay-per-views for $10 a pop. People might do it because Justin Gaethje is an animal and he's a great fighter to watch. But at the same time, it was the whole Logan Paul thing and versus KSI where people are like, all right, these guys aren't really fighters. A lot of people wanted to see Logan Paul get punched in the face because the dude is obnoxious as fuck. So I think it was more the novelty. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but Luis J. Gomez fought on Ellis Mania versus this guy, Ryan O'Neal. And they're both radio hosts, and Luis J. Gomez totally kicked his ass. It was awesome. But Jason Ellis said that it was the most, the most popular Ellis Mania he's seen in years because, people love those novelty fights. I mean, even if you look at Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, both were professional fighters, but they're in different disciplines. That did gangbusters as far as sales. It's a different thing. So if a fighter is just going to say, I'm going to go out and set up shop, there's a lot more that goes into it. I'm sure that there's a production company that approached Logan Paul and KSI and Jake Paul and said, look, we'll do all the production, just show up and fight. They have the YouTube followers, they have the Twitter followers, they have that audience with the curiosity. So I think it's a different thing. So I think if a fighter other than Conor McGregor wants to set up their own promotion, they'd be making a mistake.
There are very few that are up at that level in the UFC. You're definitely correct there. And man, I don't know. This is interesting. It's an interesting time, man. Bruce Buffer's out here disclosing how much money Nate Diaz is making Freaking, we're finally getting this Khabib versus Conor fight, though. This thing kind of snuck out of nowhere. I guess we just had to wait for the New York commission to do their thing before it finally gets announced. But you go months back and some Dagestan people are posting it on Instagram. They're like, "This fight's on, dude. This fight's on," and I'm freaking stoked. We're getting Conor back into the ring versus Khabib, the biggest fight of the year. Would you call this the biggest lightweight contest ever in the UFC?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when Conor McGregor is just a force of nature, and Khabib, the thing I love about this fight is that it's just two totally different people. It really is like Apollo Creed versus Ivan Drago fight, minus the death in the ring, obviously. But it's just you have one guy who's totally flashy, who has the gift of gab, who just has the promotional wherewithal to just get people so interested in the fight. Then you have this other guy who comes from a place where it's just cold and mean, and he's just this dude who's just he's a fighter to the core. And not saying Conor isn't a fighter to the core, but Khabib, he doesn't want to play that promotional bullshit. He wants to come out and he wants to take Conor down and just grind him into the mat. I just love this fight. I mean, I wish they could have put it in Russia. I think that would have been like total Rocky IV vibes. And you know that RJ and I have argued over the years which Rocky movie is the best. I'm Rocky IV, he's Rocky III. That would have been amazing. But regardless, the thing I love about this fight is that a lot of people that I talk to are like, oh my God, Khabib's just going to take Conor down. It's going to be a total ass whooping. What pisses me off about that statement is that Conor McGregor, time after time, has defied what people think a fighter should be. They think that, oh, well, just because he never wrestles or he never, uses jiu-jitsu, it's because he doesn't have to. I mean, that left is insane. His striking, his range, and knowing how to use distance is incredible. I mean, he's someone who is always underestimated, but always gives amazing performances. So I think it's going to be a better fight than people give it credit for. I think Conor is going to surprise people yet again.
Man, I don't know where to go with this. And you touch on some great things though, man. Do your research on Khabib. He pretty much lived in like the favelas over there in Dagestan. That's what this like Eastern European area is, man. They were at war in the 90s and like the 2000s, got attacked by Chechnya. That dude is cold to like his heart. He's cold-blooded mofo. And so I'm so stoked for that. In terms of Conor, we do underestimate him, man. Everyone out there, you were either on the Conor bandwagon or you were underestimating the shit out of him until you finally gave him his respect. But now that he's gone for 2 years, people are pissed off at him again. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Chad Mendez was able to take him down and hold him down, and that was a short camp, Chad Mendez. But on the other hand, Rory McDonald effed up Conor's knee right before that. And so Conor only really had one leg going into that fight. There's a lot to freaking, uh, you know, divulge into in that, but I love the grappling versus striking. It's kind of an old school matchup in that regard.
Yeah, it is.
As well.
No, it is. It's a classic. And am I allowed to curse? I feel bad because
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Because I figured that this wasn't like terrestrial, but I think what's interesting about Conor that a lot of people don't consider is the fact that he raises the stakes to a point where fighters are in over their head. I mean, Eddie Alvarez is the perfect case study in how Conor completely psychologically cripples people. Like, he makes the fight so enormous and the stage so large where, venues or media outlets are covering these fights that normally don't even cover mixed martial arts. And they're doing shows that they normally don't do, that the fighter is not in their wheelhouse. I mean, Eddie Alvarez is a guy who traveled all around the world, is the consummate veteran, has fought on every stage, fought in foreign countries, Japan, Europe, obviously America. That fight at Madison Square Garden was the most fascinating thing I've seen probably since I've been covering the sport. I've never seen a guy who's so technically solid just completely deviate from the game plan and look like an amateur, really. And that's what the Conor effect does. And he gets under guys' skins. He makes them want to beat him so bad. But then once the day or the night of the fight comes, they're like, this is it. Not only has this guy been talking a lot of shit, not only is this the biggest fight of my life and could possibly define my career, but now I'm walking out and this is the biggest audience that has ever watched me. And you've already seen, I mean, that whole Dolly incident at the Barclays Center, that was something that was calculated. A lot of people are like, oh, Conor was coked up. Maybe the dude did a fucking 8-ball before he did it. I don't know. But he was calculated. He was doing it because he was probably like, I can get probation. I can afford this. And he did it because now Khabib, you saw that video afterwards, after Khabib was walking from the fighter bus. He's like, just tell me where, tell me anywhere, we go fight right now. He's in Khabib's head. So what's going to be interesting is, can Khabib step in that cage and not let that get under his skin? And it, up until this point, has not worked for any other fighter. They haven't been able to beat that Conor effect. So it's going to be interesting to see if Khabib is that strong. And look, he comes from a place of the world, like you said, it's like the favelas of Russia. So maybe that adversity, but Jose Aldo came from the favelas of Brazil, and it didn't work too good for him. He gets slept in, 13 seconds? So it'll be interesting.
Right. Oh, my gosh. And freaking Habib, man. Oh, you said something. I totally forgot it. I'm too high right now. Oh, yeah. My whole take. This is what I believe happened during the whole Conor thing. Because were they at a press conference right before that, Habib and Ally Quinta?
Yeah, I
It
think
was like
so.
a media day.
It was some sort of media stuff. All the fighters were there.
Okay, I think Conor came in obviously because Artem got choked and slapped and all that nonsense. Conor comes in fashionably late, like always. He was supposed to be there an hour before, dude, to crash the whole press conference, get all the media attention and all that shit, and he didn't. And so he got so upset. He's like, I gotta get the freaking something. And so he just took his cameras, ran, went and attacked the buses. I think that's what he did, because go back and watch the Nate press conference when he throws the monster cans, because he got so riled up and upset because he showed up late. And then right after that, he tried sitting down and talking and continuing the press conference. And Dana's like, no, dude, it's done. It's over. And he was so pissed after that. And so I think that's what had happened. It was Conor obviously showing up fashionably late, and that is what led to this whole Dolly incident. But, man, the buildup is going to get crazy. I think the UFC hit it out of the park, though, dude, when they scheduled Ferguson versus Pettis to be our backup fight on the same card, just in case, God forbid, something happens. Number one, I can't believe El Kakui is freaking healed up enough. 6-month recovery from having your knee just completely ripped open is insane. But
Yeah,
props to the UFC for actually booking this. We got something. But, dude, this is Habib versus Conor. I don't care if you break your foot, you tear your knee, whatever. You step in there and get this payday if you're these guys, man. I don't see anyone pulling out of this.
Yeah, man. And Conor, it's funny, like, I feel like some people, the stars are aligned for them, and I feel like with Conor, the stars are aligned for him. It feels like, I gave the Rocky IV reference, but it really feels like every fight for Conor is kind of like a movie. And this is like, you think of, okay, we've seen Conor fight Jose Aldo after this world tour, after Jose got injured in this huge buildup, and then he knocks him out in 13 seconds, which is, the craziest thing about that is usually, like back in the day with Mike Tyson, I knew a guy that told a story about how he was walking to his seat, gave the usher his ticket, and by the time he sat down, Mike Tyson had already knocked out his opponent. Most people would be pissed off, but the Jose Aldo fight, everyone was just so shocked after that buildup. That's how it ended. No one was disappointed. I mean, obviously that card was insane, but every Conor fight is like a movie. And you think, how could any fight outdo what we saw after that whole Jose Aldo thing? And then all of a sudden, we have this fight with Khabib where it's completely so much more fascinating, for me at least, than any other fight. And you mentioned Nate Diaz before. I just want to touch on this. It's coming full circle with the conversation because, in the beginning we talked about Bruce Buffer and Nate. I really do feel that Nate is the only guy who is the complete kryptonite for Conor McGregor. Khabib Nurmagomedov may beat Conor in this upcoming fight, but I think like if they fight 10 times, I think Conor could win 5 and Khabib could win 5. Nate Diaz is a guy that, is in Conor's head as much as Conor is in his head. Even in the rematch, it was a really close fight. And it just shows you it's the psychological angle that Conor McGregor has that makes him so strong, which a lot of fighters, they practice the physical, they drill, but psychology, man, you cannot teach that. I mean, you can teach it like as far as like the practicality and like, different things like narcissism and sociology. But as far as being able to be psychologically strong, especially when you have a big ego and you're fighting someone who also has a big ego, that's tough. So it's going to be interesting to see if Khabib is able to channel a little bit of Nate Diaz.
Khabib and Conor, dude, 26-0. I think that speaks for itself in that regard. And Conor coming in, I don't care what you say, this man's the double champ. This is the biggest fight that's ever going to happen in the lightweight division. And, man, maybe this is just my take. Do you think I think the UFC messed up big time with Nate by completely abandoning him the 2 years that, Conor was away. They didn't throw any money at him to get him to come back. We had terrible pay-per-view numbers this whole time because you say it, man. When Conor fights, it's like a movie. He's got the UFC buy-in, the media buy-in, the fan buy-in, and the UFC, I think they're messing up by not building up more people. And maybe that's just Conor's the only one that can actually reach that plateau, but I think the UFC kind of has some blame for that as well.
Yeah, well, I think with the UFC, it's an interesting thing because I think it's all started with Tito, to be honest with you. Like I said before, Dana's kind of a sociopath. He's definitely a narcissist. And with narcissism and sociopathy, and I think there's a little bit of psychopathy in there, that combination of those three is called a dark triad as far as personality. And basically, sociopathy is someone who just, they're going to do whatever they can to get what they want, right? Psychopathy is someone who has no empathy for other people. And narcissism is someone who just thinks of themselves. So I think that when you have someone like Dana White, when someone like a Tito Ortiz comes along who is getting too much shine, and then, Tito and Dana had their little run-in, I think that made Dana White weary of making someone bigger than the promotion. And then, you have, Lorenzo Fertitta was really the voice of reason. He was the Jiminy Cricket to Dana White's Pinocchio, right? Yeah. He was the guy sitting on his shoulder like, dude, you're my friend, I love you, but this is my money. I'm backing this thing. So he would pull the leash on the pit bull that was Dana White when Dana got too out of control. And I think that, you get certain fighters who just transcend the sport, and to Dana White's chagrin, he kind of has to say, all right, I got to do this. And again, like Lorenzo was there now, he's got new overlords with WMEIMG. So Dana, to keep his position, because even though Dana White could walk off into the goddamn sunset, jump on a yacht, and fly off to Saint-Tropez, he loves this. It's just ingrained in him, He's like Stan Lee with Marvel. Like, he could retire and just sit on buckets full of cash, but he wants to do it. So he's got to bow to his overlords at WMEIMG, just like he had to do with the Fertitta brothers. And I think that with star power and stars, you have to be able to, as a fighter, market yourself. I remember interviewing Cub Swanson, and I remember saying to him, like, dude, you gotta, talk shit, get people riled up. And he's just like, oh, I'm just gonna let my hands do the talking. So most of the fighters don't get it. You get Ronda, who came in, and she was more of a subservient type of person. That's why Dana White loved her, because if Ronda was a bitch or a pain in the ass, she would have had the same issues as the Diaz brothers or Tito Ortiz or anyone who stepped on his feet. Now, Conor's just gotten to a point where he's become so massive. And I think the thing with Conor is, I'm sure there was some fights where Dana was like, all right, now he's going to get knocked down a peg. And then what happens? Conor comes out and just completely whoops ass. And at first, it was, a love affair between him and Dana White. But then it quickly turned into Conor being like, I want 10% of the promotion. I want this. I want that. And it's funny because even though Dana White doesn't even own the promotion anymore, it's just the fact that Conor, in his mind, has the audacity to ask for that after the machine that Dana built, where no fighter was bigger than the sport, no fighter was bigger than the UFC, and now Conor, if he beats Khabib Nurmagomedov, oh my God! If I'm Audi Attar, his manager, or Paradigm, oh my God, I'm putting a down payment on a new house. I'm putting a down payment on a new Maserati. I'm going out and taking my wife, getting some fucking red panties. I mean, it's going to be an insane negotiation because Conor's going to be asking for some big bucks.
It would be the complete takeover. I cannot wait for this. We got more than a month to build up to Khabib versus Conor. It's going to be an excellent fight. And, man, it feels like UFC 200 all over again because 228's coming up and no one gives a fuck. It's like UFC 199. Who cares about that? We got October to look forward to. We got Khabib versus Conor. And everyone, thank you so much, Ricky, for coming on. Give him a follow on Instagram and on Twitter at Bone Hoffa. And where else can everyone check you out, Ricky?
Just go to gasdigitalnetwork.com.
All right. Ricky, thank you so much for coming on, and I would love to have you back in the future.
Anytime, brother.
All right. And here's a preview, you guys, for UFC 228.
UFC superstar Conor McGregor was taken into custody.
Yo, Ricky, thank you, brother.
Belly and smashing a bus window because he sees an incident between a buddy of his.
There was an incident with Khabib and Artem's very good friends with Conor.
This guy talk shit about me, I catch him.
Conor heard about it, jumped on a plane and
Flies over to Brooklyn.
he stormed the building and started to attack the bus.
If one of us go to war, we all go to war.
You wanna fight? Come here and that's it. If you wanna do something, send me location, send me where, what time. Come here, send me a message, like location, I'm gonna come.
The fight is done. October, Las Vegas. It's on, ladies and gentlemen.
Tell them I'm coming.
Cage close.
Thank you, Nolan, for coming on for the PFL preview. I'm going to edit that part out. So PFL 7 coming up tomorrow, and this is kind of a mixture of a card, man. We got the fighters that got hurt. We got short notice step-ins, and we just got, what do they want to, showcase fights as well. How are you?
Should be interesting to see what those, the non-tournament fights have in store for us. I have heard that some of these fights, I'm not sure if it's all of them or just some of them, but the idea is that the fighters that win or the fighters that look good will be featured in next year's tournament, that it's kind of, it has that caveat in there for some of the fighters that are competing in these showcase fights.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I know one of the names that is standing out to me right away, Omar Nurmagomedov is coming over from Fight Nights Global, and he's taking on, or he's 7-0 in the bantamweight division. He's taking on another guy who's 5-0. This is the American, and I believe he might be a wrestler. And believe it or not, this Omar Nurmagomedov is more of a striking guy, man. I've seen him fight over at Fight Nights Global. He throws spinning back kicks with nice accuracy. This guy I am high up on. He was supposed to actually take a fight here in like a couple of weeks over at Fight Nights Global, but boom, Ali gets him the call up, and here he is over at PFL.
Yeah, man, he was actually originally way back in the day. He was on the WSOF roster on kind of a developmental deal type thing. I think he had only had 2 fights at that point, and they were grooming him to be able to make his debut, after a few more fights outside of the promotion. That never happened, obviously, with WSOF rebranding to PFL. But we're going to see his debut finally, or his U.S. debut finally here tomorrow night. I'm super excited for that one. And they're actually giving him a really good opponent, too. Saeed Yukub is he goes by – he's got a really long last name, so he's actually split up his first name to make it 2 names. So he goes by Saeed Yukub. But he's a guy that was on my my prospect list for the Northeast anyway. He's a really reputable opponent, and we can kind of Yukub is top 10 guy in his division in his area, so we can kind of be able to place Omar, see how he would do on the U.S. regional scenes after his performance tomorrow night. But they're not giving him a complete softball here. They're giving him a tough opponent, and I wouldn't be shocked if Yukub ended up winning the fight. I think Yukub, to be honest with you, is a little bit more progressed in his development as a fighter. Omar's got some serious skills, and I think he's still a little bit green, even though he's had 7 fights. But that's like one of my favorite fights on the entire card, if I'm being honest with you.
Same here. And man, I actually love the matchmaking though. You're gonna take 2 undefeated guys. Maybe you want one to win more than the other just as a promotion. I have no idea, but no matter what happens, you still got an undefeated guy that you could push coming out of this. And so, I think that's much better than bringing in like a 5-3 guy that, Omar can just run right through. I love that. And the very first fight of the night, though, on the Facebook watch is going to be Jason High versus Johnny Case. Jason High, now correct me if I'm wrong, was he the one that got all pissed off because he lost via dick kick?
He was the one that got pissed off because the referee, I think it was Mergliotta, said that he tapped when he didn't, or that he went out.
Oh, okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
He wasn't even close to going out. And yeah, man, it seems like they're giving him that third shot, or they are giving him that third shot. And good for him, because that he did get screwed there. And for those wondering, like, why does this guy get a third shot and not everybody? It's not just the fact that finish went that way. This is actually a fight that is occurring. He's coming in at the tournament as an alternate in the slot. He's replacing, I think, Brian Foster and Ramsey Nijam are both disqualified from tournament contention because of injuries. So he's actually coming back in as what's considered to be an alternate slot, even though he's already competed. So it's not like he's just I mean, I guess in some retrospects he is just getting a third shot, but in other ones, it's not like they're just he's still he's still taking up his regular season slot with this fight. Him and Johnny Case are both alternates, are in alternate slots for this fight.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm looking over here at the rankings, and they don't have a guy in the number 8 spot with any points, so they definitely need one more to go in here for this tournament, so that makes sense there. And working up the card, though, Hall versus Kurmagomedov, and that's going to happen in the welterweight division. I'm not sure how many points these guys both have. What are you looking forward to on that fight?
Yeah, man. I'm sorry. Who did you say it was? You cut out there for a second.
Robert Hall versus Ramzan Kurmagomedov.
Yeah, so that's a good fight too. Neither of those guys are actually in the tournament this year. That's another showcase fight. But
okay.
I think that's an excellent matchup. Kurmagomedov is a guy that has been hanging out with Zabit a lot. He trains with him. I think I forget which event it was. It might have been 2 PFLs ago, or maybe it was the last one. Whichever one Khabib was at that he was supposed to. It was like the day before that big UFC press conference, and I forget who was supposed to fight. One of Khabib's teammates was on the card, and they ended up pulling his fight. But Khabib was there with Zabit, and Ramzan Kurmagomedov was there as well. He's, again, kind of inexperienced, but he's surrounded himself with some really good fighters that he hangs out with on a regular basis. I believe he is an Ali guy, so he's definitely got somebody to guide his career in the right direction and give him these good opportunities. And Robert Hale, even though his record's not, maybe the best record on this card, from what I've been hearing, I have some friends down in the Carolina areas. They're saying, he's always been a guy to fight, to take tough fights, to take short notice fights, to not really care who exactly he fights. I mean, one of his losses was to Sidney Wheeler, who just competed on Brave. I think we talked about him the last time that we came. And the other one was to Jonathan Cobb, who at the time was undefeated, and he's sitting at 4-1 now. So I think it's a good fight. I think they did a good job of grabbing not only fighters that are exciting for this for the showcase fights, but also fighters that have some potential and could maybe go away for a fight or two, throw their name out there in the PFL this weekend, and then like I said, get back there next year and maybe be in a tournament.
Do you foresee maybe a longer season next year? Because everyone only had 2 fights.
Yeah, I for sure see one. I mean, that was the plan for this year, and obviously things didn't work out the way that PFL had hoped. Mm-hmm. I think as far as as long as they continue, which it seems like they have a lot of investors, as long as they still have the money to be able to do it, that they feel like they're moving in the right direction. I think that next year we'll see at least 3 regular season fights for each fighter, and I think it will start beginning of the year, January, like it was supposed to this year.
Gotcha. And then we got a heavyweight bout. Mo De Rees, never heard of this guy. He's 5-0 though, taking on Leroy Johnson, 8-2. What can you tell us about this fight?
Yeah, so this is another good matchup. Two guys that were on the regional scene, and Darius is a guy that's had a lot of trouble getting fights. I don't remember the last time that he fought. I can look it up right now, but it's been a few years actually. I think he's undefeated. He's 5-0. He's only 30 years old, but he hasn't fought since January of 2016. So it's been 2.5 years off for him, and he's had just a ton of fights fall out. My understanding is people pulling out the day of weigh-ins, that whole ordeal. We've seen some fighters really struggle when that happens to them, but it's exciting for him to get back in there. PFL giving him a good platform to be able to display his talents on the national stage. And Leroy Johnson is a guy that I think would be on a lot more people's radars in terms of a prospect if it wasn't for his age. I mean, he's 38 years old. He's going on 39, and he has had some success. His only losses in his career have been to UFC veteran Pat Walsh and then Jason Riley, who's a very experienced heavyweight out of the Midwest. So pretty solid record. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He's known for getting not necessarily getting a lot of finishes as a heavyweight. He's a guy that can go the 3 rounds. So I think Darius is probably going to want to get him out there early, and Johnson's going to be the guy that wants to take it a little longer, make things dirty, and get that go the distance or push it into the later round.
Good to know. And yeah, it looked like the man who's having trouble getting fights, Mo Darius, he was scheduled to fight Volkan Ozdemir at one point in time. That got canceled, and he had 3 cancels in a row. Man, that's gotta. I can't imagine that happening, man. Getting prepared for a fight and they pull out last minute. That would just tear me apart.
Yeah, that's brutal, man. There's so many things that go into the sport that we don't even think about that are just it must be tough to be a fighter. That's all I have to say.
Oh, yeah. And then coming up, Caio Magalhães, is he related to Vinny by chance?
No, he's not related to Vinny, but Caio was actually in the UFC for a little while. He was, you might remember him for a spitting incident against Josh Saman. He spewed blood at him after Saman choked him out, and then he ended up having one more fight. I think he lost to Brad Tavares and got the axe.
Oh, man. And he takes on, what is that, a Swedish gentleman out here named Sadabu Sai, and that's going to happen in the middleweight division.
Yeah, that's going to be a tournament bout. Magalhães is as an alternate. Sai, I believe, had one fight. I forget who he fought. There's so many PFL fights in such a short amount of time that they're all kind of blending together a little bit, especially with the more unfamiliar names. He lost his first fight to Bruno Santos. So, he's got his second shot. Magalhães looking to sneak in the tournament and pull out a win, get the one fight for PFL and just jump right in the tournament. So at least Magalhães, a little bit of a notable name just from his UFC tenure. And then Sai, obviously, he fought for PFL previously. So I think that will be an interesting fight. I think, that they will have to get a finish probably, both sitting at 0 points to hop in the tournament. But maybe that will make the fight a little more exciting.
Man, and then let's do this. Let's jump all the way to the main event. This guy Rama from the Canadian. Man, his first fight was, I believe, did he fight Brandon Halsley?
Yeah, I think that was maybe my favorite fight of the season.
Yeah, I totally agree. That dude got busted up, though. They had to stop it at the end of round 2, and he was, I guess PFL was nice enough to give him a long break before he had to come back in for his second fight. And so he's coming in. Hopefully he can get the victory and get into the tournament, because this dude puts on nice fights. He's facing Jamie Abdullah. But then the next fight down, I can't pronounce this Russian's name that's taking on Sean O'Connell, but Sean O'Connell's the UFC vet, and he's taking on a hell of a Russian right here at 18-2. What can you tell us about this one?
I think this is my favorite fight on the card in terms of entertainment value. O'Connell is always super exciting. It's do or die. I mean, we saw that in his first fight. He fought Ronnie Marks in that first fight and ended up getting a come from behind knockout victory in the first round, which was definitely one of the highlights of this season so far. And Bazagir Ataev is a weird scenario. He's a weird case where before his fight at PFL 1, I believe, against Dan Spawn, he had not fought for like forever. Let's see. His last fight before, I shouldn't say that. So he had one fight in PFL, Dan Spawn. He had one fight in 2017, and then the last fight that he had before that was in 2006. His only loss before entering the PFL tournament was to Alistair Overeem at Pride 24. So it was really interesting to see him come back at 39 years old, and he honestly looked very, very good in that first fight against Spawn. He was winning the whole fight, and Spawn ended up getting a knockout towards the end of the fight. I think it was it says 4:31 of round 3. So, man, that was a tough loss for him to suffer, especially when he looked so good. But I think him and O'Connell will be a perfect fight, a perfect matchmaking, and I think it will be a thrilling fight for the fans that ultimately probably will end in a finish.
Man, yeah, that's crazy. Basically took, a decade off of a career, comes back and is doing the damn thing, trying to win $1 million. That's got to be exciting. And then Magmamed Irzarov takes on Alexandre Bizarra. Man, I'm terrible at pronouncing names. But this is a featherweight contest for us.
Yeah.
A guy from Russia versus a guy from the Northeast.
Yeah.
What are you thinking of this?
I like this fight. I mean, Bizarra is another guy. I believe he fought for LFA recently, but he's fought kind of everywhere. I think he's fought for Bellator. He's fought a bunch of different places. Clearly has a lot of experience under his belt, sitting with 26 fights. He's 30 years old. So he has the experience factor in this one, but Idrisov was one of the favorites entering this tournament, at least on paper, kind of a dark horse. And his first fight, he was winning, pummeling Steven Seiler. This was another season highlight. Pummeling Steven Seiler, and Seiler ends up, getting the improbable submission victory. A lot of people found it a little bit controversial in the fact that Keith Peterson didn't step in there and stop that fight with how badly Seiler was getting beaten. So if Idrisov can capitalize on his opportunity this time and not, get too flustered and too caught up in everything and get caught in a choke, or, get tired and get caught in a choke, I think this is going to be a really good fight. I think both guys are going to bring it, and this is a good slot for it's a good position on the card for them to be in on the main card.
Nice, yes. And then Paul Bradley, Anderson Ferreira. Ferreira's got a nice record there coming from Brazil at 11-1, and this is a welterweight contest.
Yeah, Paul Bradley, even when he sometimes he'll get knocked out, sometimes he'll lose, but he always brings it. He's a guy that you can expect a lot of, and he's not an easy outing for anyone. He's one of those high risk, low reward fights. He makes it dirty, doesn't make it pretty, and he's somebody that I think anybody in any organization would you could throw him in there and he would be able to keep up with them. But like you said, Ferreira has a really good record. He's 28 years old, sitting at 12-1 or 11-1, and I think that this is going to be a good fight. Again, I think PFL did a good job of putting the right fights on the right places on the card. I think with one exception, the Jason High Johnny Case fight on the prelims was a little interesting. But other than that, I think they've done an excellent job all season of putting the right fights in the right slots and making every fight seem like it matters.
Exactly, man. Don't call it the prelims, call it the Facebook watch portion, because
right.
One fight, one finish, you're into the playoffs. You're coming back in October.
I thought that was one of the best promos they had, or best catchphrases or whatever it was, when the posters they were using where it was saying there are no prelims. That's pretty accurate, and I think it's a good they should run with that more. And I think they've done a good job of it, really drilling home that all these fights are equal. There's not, you can have the two biggest names on the card, and you can have the two most unknowns on the card, and they're still, no matter what happens, they're an even playing field. And it brings a structure to the whole system. With the UFC rankings and stuff, there's a lot of debates and who, the matchmaking, how did this guy end up with this guy and everything. But this puts a little more structure to it and makes it seem like we kind of at least know what's going on.
And one of my favorites, if you fight an exciting fight, you might be the main eventer in your next fight, man. You never know. And we don't exactly know all these names. Nolan might, but man, the structure of PFL makes it exciting just in that. Is it going to be a first-round finish? Is he going to get sixth and make it into the tournament? Man, I'm excited to see once these standings come out how that's all going to work up. PFL is just, it's got my excitement, man. I'm fully peaking over here.
Absolutely, man. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This and Contender Series have been, the two really pleasant surprises that MMA has provided for us in these past couple years, and hopefully they keep rolling with it. They keep keep their momentum up and keep doing the putting on these great cards. And the system seems like it's working so far. We'll see what happens when we get to the playoffs, but I'd give them, an A+ on my card through their first 6 events going on 7.
Oh, same here, man. And let's all be sure to tune in tomorrow. NBC Sports in the Facebook Watch portion. Thank you so much, Nolan, for coming on. Give him a follow at MMA_Kings on Twitter. And you got anything else you want to plug for the people?
No, man. I'm got a couple things coming out this week. Flow Combat. We're really rolling over there now, trying to get out even more content to you guys. I have a pretty interesting piece I'm doing with UFC heavyweight Azuna and Yanwu tomorrow, something a little bit different. So look for that. Otherwise, just check out my pieces. Follow me on Twitter at MMA_Kings. I'm also doing some stuff with MMA Today, doing a lot of stuff with Tapology too. So feel free to, if you see any errors, shoot me a message. I'll make sure to make some corrections. But thanks for having me on again, man. I'm sure I'll be on again in the future.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And until next time, back to all you sickos. We're out of here. Peace.